So let's talk about SQL Server Configuration Manager, which after installing SQL Server will be on your system because it's a graphical user interface where you manage the configuration of SQL Server. And apart from the SQL Server, so there are a lot of services that come with SQL Server. So we have the SQL Server database engine, you have the SQL Server analytical services, we have the SQL Server integration services, we have SQL Server reporting services. But if you do a basic installation of SQL Server, the services you are seeing on the picture here are what you would get if you do a basic installation. So this first one here, this is the database engine. This is the database engine. And then you have the SQL Server browser, which is currently stopped. As you can see, it's now running. And then we have the SQL Server agent. This one is currently running. So these are the three services you would see. If you see here, it says SQL Server services. If you did a basic installation of SQL Server. So let's break it down. What each of these. So the database engine, this is like the main engine of SQL Server. You know, this is what controls SQL Server itself. Where it controls SQL Server, where the data is saved and all that. But the SQL Server browser, if you have multiple instances on your server, and this enables you to juggle between one instance and the other. It helps to resolve the port to know which instance, and that is default instance. MS SQL Server in parentheses, then that is default instance. That's how you identify a default instance on the configuration manager. But a named instance will have any name other than MS SQL Server. A named instance will have any name other than this name. So it's a name that you give it. It's a named instance. You have to give it that name yourself. You can call it whatever you like. So for example, you can say await. But we don't have that here. So what you're seeing here on the configuration manager is just a default instance. And then you can only have one default instance. I mentioned that you may have features, you will only have the database engine. And that is what we have here at the top here. This is the database engine. And you have the agent, and you have the browser. So the browser is only necessary if you have a named instance. Once you have a named instance, then this browser will become active. But right now, because I don't have a named instance, it is stopped. So there are two types of instances in SQL Server, the default and the named. How do you identify a default instance? If you go on Configuration Manager and you see MS SQL Server in front of the SQL Server service, then this is a default. But if you see a name or any name other than MS SQL Server, for example, if you see await, then that is a named instance because that name was given. It is not the default. This is default. It comes from SQL Server or from Microsoft. Okay, but any other name is given by the person who installed it, and that's a name. That's why it's called a named instance. And you can have up to 99, which I'm not sure. I'm going to double check. Give me 1 second. Let me quickly double check that. Okay, it's 50. Yep, sorry. Not 99, it's 50. Yeah, I know if it's not 50, it's 99. So it's actually 50. You can have up to 50 instances. So only one of those 50 instances, only one of those 50 instances can be default, and the remaining, this will be 49. Sorry about that. Yep, the remaining 49 will be named, but not many. You hardly see a server that would have up to 50. It's usually maybe just, for the most part, just one instance, which is the default. Or some will have the named without a default. Some will have a combination of default and named, but it's not usually a lot, maybe maximum 5. Because if you put a lot of instances there, all those instances will share the resources on that server, and it may not be enough for all of them. So there's no point. And of course, if you have multiple instances on the server, if something happens to that server, all the instances will be down. Because they are using the same memory, they're using the same storage, they're using the same CPU. So if something happens to all those resources, all the instances will be inaccessible or will be down, and you don't want that. Okay, so the configuration manager is where we manage the configuration of SQL Server. So as long as this service is running, this database engine, we can access SQL Server. But once it stops running, nobody can access SQL Server. As long as this agent is running, all the jobs that we schedule will run. But once this agent is stopped, even if we have scheduled jobs, they will not run, because this is the service that is responsible for running those agents. If you have a if you have a named instance, if this SQL Server browser is not working, you will not be able to connect to your named instance. But if you have default, just like I have here, then you don't need the SQL Server browser. All right, let's move on. So we're going to do a demo of how we can do some changes here that would affect connectivity and the functionality of SQL Server based on what we modify on the configuration manager.